The Trouble in Paradise podcast is intended for mature audiences. This means you will hear realistic adult language such as and go off. Audience discretion is advised.
What is knob polishing?
You're going to make me say this. I am a neglected man.
I like to think that I look like a jack, even though my name's really Bob.
Does he have danglers or something?
Well, it's time to go do them lighthouse duties.
Sitting in the cheese at the old Walmart to cool off.
That should be the headline. Man tasered in the nuts after stealing beef.
Yeah, but you're not going to sit in the cheese. You're not going to sit in the cheese, and you're not going to put ribeyes down your pants either.
House cleaning is secondary. So what is the Viagra triangle?
Possibly we aid in your digestion.
I don't know if his little hand is smaller than his little ears or what.
Aw, well, maybe he has a syndrome.
You want to go check out my RV? It's parked right around the corner. Because I'm pretty sure that I saw some moose knuckle.
No.
There is absolutely some moose knuckle going on.
My swampy friend. What the hell is a swampy friend?
I know. So they're not going to get any scraping on their shaft.
Yes, I'm going to do a downward dog.
Okay, pretty lady. You had on those gosh darn sexy leather looking shorts.
Ladies and gentlemen, and assholes, gather around. It's time for another action-packed episode of
Trouble in Paradise.
Hi, I'm Nigel Kent.
And I'm Jazmine Starr,
And welcome to Trouble in Paradise,
where we talk about everything amazing, awkward, auspicious, and sometimes even ass-tastic here in Southwest Florida.
Like, what kind of ass-tastic things have been going on lately in Southwest Florida? By the way, hi, Jazmine Starr.
Hi.
It's been a little bit, hasn't it?
It's been quite a while.
It's been like 3 or 4 little bits.
At least.
Well,
I can't remember. I think we had the election night mayhem. Maybe.
I think we did. Our last 2 episodes were last year.
Yep.
We did election night mayhem, and we did Santa Got That Rona.
Yep. And then I had to take a little break after that.
Well, a lot of things happened.
Yeah.
A lot of things happened, and I moved not long after you moved.
Yep.
And the official Trouble in Paradise studio has also moved.
Yes.
Jazmine Starr hooked the place up with new chairs, a new table, new everything. So,
yeah, we're in a transition stage right now, in many ways, studio-wise. But hopefully, we'll get our green screen back up and running here, along with some other goodies. And
the green screen is stuffed in a storage unit someplace in deep in the bowels of Naples, Florida.
in the bowels.
Yes, but
there are many bowels in Naples, Florida.
Yes, there are. I know at least 3 or 4 different bowels in Naples, Florida. So rather than coming at you live from beautiful Bonita Springs, Florida, we're coming at you live from pretty nice South Naples, Florida, and we got palm trees and sunshine, so
Can't complain.
Can't complain. Jazmine, you've brought up some very interesting subjects about which we will be talking this evening, including something that is very, very unpopular in Southwest Florida, which is mosquitoes. And you found a pretty interesting story about how mosquitoes are being harnessed by people like Bill Gates in order to, well, we'll fill in the blanks on that.
Yep.
And what was the other one you found? An AI program now from the military that apparently can detect sarcasm?
Yeah, it's a project where computer programs are trying to detect, AI programs are trying to detect sarcasm.
You know, it's interesting that would come out of the military, because if you've ever been sarcastic to somebody who's active military.
Right. And you look at, everything that goes on with, need we say censorship, And now they're trying to find.
So there's a dark motive to these AI detectors.
Did I say that?
Judging by how many of our friends have been kicked off Twitter in the last 12 months, I'd say it's probably pretty legit.
Twitter or any other platform.
Hashtag delete Facebook. Okay. And then lockdowns. We hate lockdowns.
Yep.
There are some real concerns around lockdowns, and we're going to talk about some of the damages that have occurred over in the UK because of these COVID lockdowns, which were intended to save many a life. But it turns out that quite the opposite has happened. And so we're going to go through that. But just to make sure that it's not a total downer.
Not a total downer.
It's not a total downer. So, where do you want to start? You want to, let's start with this AI stuff. So the military is apparently testing some artificial intelligence. That just means software for all you frickin' nimrods that buy everything and wear masks and stuff. They've got some software that allows computers to detect sarcasm, which is pretty awesome. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this, Jasmine Star?
All right. So this article that I found comes from Defense One.
Which is well known for having their articles disappear after a while.
Yeah, that was actually where I found the article on luciferase, and that was being used in 2011 as part of a training where they were putting a bioluminescent marker in soldiers, skins, right? Yes, to help detect influenza in 2011. And
so
to
last
see,
year you speculated that it could be tied into a COVID vaccine in order to provide a living like UV scanner.
Exactly.
To tell if you were vaccinated or not, right?
Exactly. Okay. And some type of microchipping. And ironically, some of these mosquitoes are actually carrying a bioluminescent marker, a red marker.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yep.
But
yeah,
that would be...
all this stuff connects, though, isn't it?
Isn't it? Mm-hmm. All the way back from 2010, 2011. So, yeah. Defense1.com, how to detect sarcasm with AI.
So this isn't like this headline, how to detect sarcasm with artificial intelligence, seems like it's a how-to article. Like, we're going to give you how to program some AI, but that's not quite what it is. So what do they have for us?
Humans make inferences about tone and meaning, but algorithms can find hidden relationships between words to detect irony and intentional falsehood.
Okay, so that sounds a little something like a lie detector test, huh?
A little different. A new AI tool funded by, in part by the U.S. military has proven adept at a task that has traditionally been very difficult for computer programs, detecting the human art of sarcasm. It could help intelligence officers or agencies better apply artificial intelligence to trend analysis by avoiding social media posts that aren't serious.
Okay, now
this is where I'm like, I want to like to hit the BS button on that one.
Well, it could help intelligence officers or intelligence agencies, so the CIA, the NSA, better apply AI to trend analysis by avoiding social media posts that aren't serious.
Why are they even like, get out of our social media? We have our First Amendment rights.
Right.
First of all.
Right.
So who cares if I want to be sarcastic?
So if you want to post a meme about blowing something up, they're going to make a computer program be able to tell if you're serious or not. That's going to end well.
Well, and what I'm sure they're going to do is start to evaluate the trend of that person and, essentially profiling.
That's a good point, because isn't this whole like discussion and narrative around AI kind of just like designed to get people to trust the concept of AI, where whenever they throw the word AI out there, it automatically has credibility. Oh, it must be right because it's AI. That's kind of like experts say. Like,
Well,
these catchphrases.
yeah. Well, I'm probably quite the opposite when it comes to AI.
Yeah, I am too. Like I'm almost ready to chuck my MacBook in Lake Erie, but whatever. So it says certain words in specific combinations can be a predictable indicator of sarcasm in a social media post. You think? Okay, there's some sarcasm. Even if there isn't much other context. Two researchers from the University of Central Florida noted in a March paper in the journal Entropy. Okay, you know what entropy is? It's what's left in a system when all the energy is gone. And they named their research publication Entropy and whatever. So using a variety of data sets of posts from Twitter, Reddit, various dialogues, and even headlines from The Onion, they should use Babylon Bee because that's sarcastic as shit. Garibay and his colleague mapped out how some keywords relate to others. For instance, words such as just, again, totally, exclamation point, have darker edges connecting them with every other word in a sentence. These are the words in the sentence that hint at sarcasm, and as expected...
I just totally again.
Red flag. Don't use the word just. Yep. So what else do they tell us?
The method relies on what the researchers refer to as a self-attention architecture, a method for training complex AI programs called neural networks to give more weight to some words than to others, depending on what words appear nearby and what the program is tasked to do. Attention is a mechanism to discover patterns in the input that are crucial for solving the given task. In deep learning, self-attention is an attention mechanism for sequences, which helps learn the task-specific relationship between different elements of a given sequence to produce a better sequence representation.
So in other words, this is another layer of language understanding. Mm-hmm. Right. So, what's probably very true about this? The AI probably can't make heads or tails of the actual language. In other words, the AI probably cannot understand written English, but it can search for these word sequences and flag them.
Yep. Well, and that's what it's saying here. Detecting sarcasm using algorithms may not seem to have much military relevance, but consider how much more time people spend online than just a few years ago. And also consider the growing role of open source intelligence like social media posts and helping the military to understand what's happening in key areas where they might be operating. They might be operating. Well, who's they?
The military.
But who else could they be referring to?
Well, this isn't helping the military to understand what's happening in areas where they may be.
The work was supported by by DARPA. Which the Defense One is also it is DARPA. DARPA was also responsible for that 2011 article that I had mentioned at the beginning of the cast there.
Well, yeah, because DARPA is also the same organization that was largely responsible for the creation of the internet to begin with. So it makes sense that they'd be piling all of these. Now that everybody's using their creation, they're piling all these adaptive and analytical technologies on top of it to try to. Experiment on the rats in the maze.
Good point.
Okay, I could not detect the intelligence there. I must not have good AI.
No, I mean, it's...
All right, so program seeks a deeper and more quantitative understanding of adversaries' use of global information environment than is currently possible using existing approaches. So, I think this is pretty telling. I mean, I think this has more to do with censorship and content monitoring than it does to have to do with defense or defending the United States.
Right here underlined, right in the bottom paragraph. Essential for the use of artificial intelligence in the context of national security.
Which does not mean foreign invasion anymore. That's not what it means. They'll call any threat to them a national security threat. So the next big challenge is handling ambiguities, colloquialisms, slang, and coping with the language evolution. I think the next big challenge is actually getting a computer to really be able to understand and interpret English, which is very, very hard. You can get them to read it out loud, but getting them to contextualize and store knowledge about what's written in order to understand what written English means is a huge undertaking. And I think if you're going to write a program that can detect the words between the lines, the sarcasm, you better know how to read the actual lines first. And because isn't that what's taught? That's how children learn how to read English. Read the actual words. And then as you get older and wiser, and you get made fun of a couple times for not picking up on it, then all of a sudden you realize that the sarcasm is there and that the irony is present. Well, anyway, that's my take. So are we behind this AI stuff, or do we not care? Facebook was probably doing this 10 years ago, and now it's public, right?
Well, I mean, it's all just a bunch of crap, really.
A bunch of crap. Oh,
it's all just a bunch of crap.
There you go. That's it. Jasmine Starr says it's a bunch of crap. Speaking of crap, do you think mosquitoes poop?
Of course they do.
Oh, man. So they're just flying around pooping all the time? Like birds? So it's not just birds pooping from the sky. Mosquitoes and flies, dragonflies, and any other flying bats, all kinds of things just pooping.
It's just a total shit show everywhere.
Kind of like lockdowns.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So, there is a great article regarding the damage that has occurred to global economies, but in particular to the UK economy, that was published on the 4th of May, I believe, by The Critic, which is a UK publication. I'm sorry, May 13th. Mm-hmm. It was written by a guy named Tom Moran. And in this article, he kind of indicts and condemns the use of lockdowns in order to treat. And to be fair, he legitimizes the COVID illness. Like, he completely buys the numbers. He buys all the testing.
He doesn't denounce the fact that there is an issue with it,
right, like
many other people do. Yeah, he's not saying that at all, but he is definitely pointing out the irreparable damage that's been caused as a result of locking down a country, which in a way far surpasses the actual damages that were caused from the pandemic.
And it's interesting too that the editor chose the headline, "Lockdown was a choice." Mm-hmm. And I view that as a compliance versus non-compliance statement. Like, if everybody chose not to lock down, there would have been no lockdowns. But a majority of people chose to bend over and receive the battering ram from the powers that be.
Well, I think in many ways they made that almost nearly impossible not to.
Well, they allowed social discriminatory behavior to become the norm so that people would have this virtual signaled false moral high ground that they could stand on with which to belittle those around them who weren't complying with the things that the powers that be wanted.
Right. But I mean,
wear a mask and stand 6 feet apart.
But I agree with that.
And they're still doing it in places like Michigan.
Think about just being, say, like a parent, for instance. There wasn't a choice for a while that your child went to school. And in some places, that's still the case where you have like these virtual online, and many states where they haven't returned back to school.
The schools are still closed.
Yeah, we're fortunate here in Florida that our schools are open in many cases.
Most cases, yeah.
Yeah, we're blessed to live where we do because other places are not as fortunate as we are. But imagine those kind of impacts where they have no choice. I mean,
they have a choice. They can throw up the middle finger to the public school system, yank their children out of it, And
where are they going to put them? I mean, aside from relocate to a place like here.
Well, they can teach their kids at home.
Exactly. But what if that parent is a full-time single parent?
Well, I mean, if you go back, if you wind the clock back a certain number of decades, that would have never been a question to even be raised because households stuck together. And it wasn't just agricultural households, it was all households because there was one breadwinner, one educator, one caretaker, like everybody had their role. Now, I'm not advocating for that today, but I mean, there is a choice, and if
you
it
put
matters
yourself
enough,
in my shoes,
okay, I'm not talking about your situation, okay?
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying, like, if we used my particular situation,
which nobody knows, so why don't you explain it to them?
I am a single mother, and
so that's not unique.
No, and there's a lot of single parents, you know, and
so that's consequential to. That's one of the constituents that the powers that be
they almost
leverage and take advantage of.
Exactly. Yep. And that's been one of the things that like has been like that just is almost like the icing on the cake where it just like where they just want to stick you and drive that little knife in. Yep. You know, because it's like they've done everything they can to make you dependent on government. In every way, shape, or form, in some way to break you down and make you conform.
Well, you think about it. You bring a child into the world. Right off the rip, you're required to license that child into existence using Social Security enrollment. Mm-hmm. Okay? You have to license them into existence by obtaining a legal certificate of birth. Okay? How dehumanizing is that? That's like having a piece of currency with a little baby's face on it and saying, okay, now you're legitimate. You have become currency. Okay? Every time when they go to school, they have to be dehumanized even further by proving that they're good enough to go to school. Which vaccines do you have?
Exactly.
Okay.
I need your blue and your gold card before you can come to school.
Yep.
Or
okay.
you have to prove.
You want to be really cool. They turn 16. You buy them a car. You give them that car. And then in order to operate their own property, they have to go pay a tax, get a license plate. You know, I mean, there's all these official. So you're right. At every turn, the government creates a way for you, and the powers that be create a way for you to be dependent on them, and sometimes with a gun to your head. 18 years old. Now you have to register to vote. If you're a boy, you also have to register for the military. Okay. Then you get to be 21. Congrats. Now you get to go get a new license. You get married. Oh, we have a license for that too. You have to obtain permission from the government in order to get married and get divorced. Oh, you know what? We're going to step in and decide how much money each of the divorcees gets and who gets the kids. And so, yeah, the government is completely up everybody's ass about everything all the time. But getting back to what we were talking about regarding the impact of lockdowns.
Yeah. I really love this article.
So lockdown was a choice from the critic, 13 May 2021. In the third or fourth paragraph, he says, consider society as a patient. The novel coronavirus is the cancer. Again, we can split hairs on whether or not it's that serious, but...
No, but I do like the analogy, though, that he paints there with that.
The government scientific advisors are the oncologists, and the measures they prescribe are the treatment. No one can deny that the response to the threat of SARS-CoV-2 has been extreme, and I think we would agree on that, too.
Yep.
Unlike chemotherapy, the treatments advocated by public health advisors are novel and experimental. That's true, too.
Yep.
Thus far, the side effects have included, but are not limited to, the largest drop in GDP in over 3 centuries.
Yep.
At least 70,000 families facing homelessness, alcohol deaths rising to a 20-year high, doubling of suicide-related calls to the London Ambulance Service, increased eating disorders in children and young people, a 60% increase in domestic abuse, 350,000 missed cancer referrals, 50,000 delayed child surgeries. That one might actually be, some of those might actually be good, though. And a $2.9 billion cut from the foreign aid budget. Okay. I'm not sure what that means in the UK, but foreign aid is usually not a good thing from where I'm sitting here in the U.S. On a global scale, UNICEF has forecasted 1.2 million child deaths as a result of lockdowns, not the virus itself.
That's awful.
And I think that's low.
That just gives me goosebumps to hear that number. 1.2 million child deaths as a result of lockdowns, not the virus itself.
Mm-hmm. Articles about collateral damage widely use phrases such as due to the pandemic or because the government was forced to lock down. This is a very deliberate line of rhetoric designed to shut down retrospective analysis of this course of action by conflating the fallout from government policy with the effects of the pandemic itself. This technique is all over the place in the media right now. Mm-hmm. Deliberate line of rhetoric designed to shut down retrospective analysis.
Yes.
Okay, if you even so much as mention 2 weeks to flatten the curve, everybody is just done with you. Like you're some kind of conspiracy theorist. This is what they were actually telling us 18 months ago.
Yeah.
I mean, this was the real shit.
Yeah.
2 weeks to flatten the curve. And now if you bring it up, it's like, no. No retrospective analysis allowed. We're shutting you down.
Yep.
So anyway, face coverings in the community were widely seen as an ineffective and possibly counterintuitive response to an epidemic. 1 year on, however, we are prohibited from questioning the efficacy of any of those new and extreme ideas and are largely tricked into believing that these measures were the only possible course of action the whole time. And so anything, you can't question it. And think people were questioning it back then, and all the news about how it was being questioned has just been erased.
Oh, well, I mean, it continues to be shut down and erased. I was telling you about the issue of removing the masks and face coverings in the school system, and the county commissioners meeting, and
the protest at the recent commissioners meeting in Collier County, Florida.
The live feed was actually shut down, like in the middle of the feed.
Like intentionally, somebody turned it off.
From the Collier County Commissioner's office, shut down the feed
because they didn't want.
So they didn't want
the
general. Well, they didn't want the general public to see what was going on inside the meeting as this gentleman stood up and talked. And thankfully, there was, a couple people that were in the meeting that stood up and they started to watch and pulled out their cameras and went live and streamed it that way. And then we get into thank goodness for citizen journalism.
Yeah.
Because without that,
they were probably Facebook living it, which means Facebook was probably then shutting them down.
Well, it was shared enough times and that I still got to see it. And this was probably a week and a half after the meeting. Still,
so did WINK report on it?
Not that I'm aware of.
Naples Daily News report?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Like.
Yeah.
When they say, and they're working on this, the Democrats are working on this trusted news initiative or whatever they're calling it, trusted news source initiative stuff. How in the world are they ever going to pull the wool over everybody's eyes when we know Naples Daily News did not report on what was really a remarkable experience?
Because there are so many people that are still blind to the fact and believe what they see on television is the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the truth. And that's the sad truth.
So this article goes on to say, but there was a choice. The government made that choice. Whether you feel that this choice was appropriate or proportional to the risks is not the issue here. At the very least, one has to understand the importance of separating collateral damage caused by our measures from the effects of the virus itself. Following an initial cost-benefit analysis predicting 200,000 deaths as a result of the first lockdown, the government seemingly lost all interest in forecasting the collateral damage of their pandemic response, presenting their measure as the only viable option. So whenever the data doesn't agree, they go in a different direction, head in a different direction. So all these different things that we've heard have been if it doesn't add up, if the public disagrees, if the data that's presented does not support their original narrative, they just change the narrative and change their approach, and they've been doing it for 18 straight months.
Well, they're going to do anything they can to save face.
I don't even think they're trying to save face right now. I think their technique is to just demean, criticize, and attempt to embarrass anybody that calls them out on their bullshit.
Yeah.
And the truth does not matter. It really does not. So, there's another pretty interesting story here about mosquitoes. What in the world is going on in the Florida Keys with their mosquitoes? There's some scientists trying to solve a problem. What is it?
Well, it depends on which way we want to look at it.
Well, give us the mainstream story first.
The mainstream story is that there is a release of genetically modified mosquitoes that are meant, they're males. They're meant to mate with the females. They express a gene that makes the female azithromycin, which is an antibiotic, dependent. That way, as they pass on this
Kills the female.
This gene, then for future offspring, it's going to continue to create a dying cycle for future generations. That's what we're being told.
So, in other words, these are genetically modified mosquitoes, which are going to help us get rid of mosquito bites once and for good in the Florida Keys.
Well, there's
nothing wrong with that. I love it.
There's 3,500 different mosquitoes, and in Florida, species, and in Florida alone, there's 2 specific ones that carry disease, and this is just one of the 2 that carry disease that we're focusing in on.
So we're going to eliminate 50% of disease-carrying mosquitoes.
Now,
that sounds like a pretty good idea.
It does sound like a good idea, doesn't it?
It does. It sounds like a great idea. I mean, can we get rid of the no-see-ums too while we're at it? Those nasty buggers that are down there by the beach at dusk?
Well, like one of the things, they took some of this when they were looking at it from a study. They did this in Brazil when they were trying to, I believe it was in 2011 or 2014. Don't quote me on that one, on the year. But in Brazil, they used genetically modified mosquitoes for Zika virus when they saw a spike in Zika cases. We also concurrently then, in 2016, saw a spike in Zika cases then in Florida. This is something that I have had a little bit of personal medical background with.
You've had to screen patients for certain mosquito-borne diseases, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So according to the Scientific American, this week, mosquito eggs placed in the Florida Keys are expected to hatch tens of thousands of genetically modified mosquitoes.
Just 2 days.
Okay.
Yay.
This is another interesting thing, too. One of these articles says like 300,000. One of them says tens of thousands. And one of them says 7 million or something like that. So their numbers are all vastly different. And this is where it gets interesting.
As they start to reproduce.
And the money behind this experiment belongs to?
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation?
Ah, okay. So a biotechnology firm called Oxitec delivered the eggs in late April as a part of a federally approved experiment to study the use of genetic engineering to control disease-carrying mosquito populations. The move targets an invasive species called Aedes aegypti. I'm probably mispronouncing that because I don't know good Latin. Mosquito that carries Zika, dengue, chikungunya, whatever that is, yellow fever, and potentially other deadly diseases. The experiment relies on a genetic alteration that will be lethal to a large number of future offspring. By the way, did you know that only female mosquitoes bite people?
I didn't know that until you told me.
Yeah, only the females
Yeah.
are the bloodsuckers among mosquito population. That's just good information, so you know.
I thought you were going to say something else about like amongst all populations.
No, just mosquitoes. Just mosquitoes. I've heard female spiders can be particularly nasty as well. Oxitec overcame significant regulatory hurdles before getting the go-ahead from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration in 2016, and then the Environmental Protection Agency in 2020. Now, why would the FDA be involved in something that has nothing to do with medicine or food production? Do you think it has anything to do with a certain patent?
Well, if it's the Food and Drug Administration and these mosquitoes are carrying a gene that has to do with azithromycin, then that's where the drug component would come into it.
I see what you're saying. But there's also the potential, apparently, that you discovered another NIH abstract, which is an article about the intentional use of mosquitoes to vaccinate people.
I did find something, yes.
By biting them.
Yep,
That is scary as shit.
it is.
Why don't you share from us from that flying vaccinator article? Do you still have that one pulled up? This is a really disturbing Bill Gates wet dream. And there's a PubMed article that's actually on the National Institute of Health site that describes the patent application for the use of mosquitoes to do vaccination of humans. And that should be arriving in your inbox any second. I just emailed the link over to Jazmine. So flying vaccinators is what they're calling it. And
Yeah, well, I wanted to mention too that there's two corporations that are involved in this, and Oxitec.
Neither one of them is American?
One is American AgriCorp, and that's the one that has somebody from Monsanto, and
Monsanto, the genetic modification of the food supply, right?
yeah, and then Oxitec, who's able to get all of these nice little patents and everything, is even though they're not a U.S. based corporation, they're based out of the U.K. Yet they're able to get
a ton of American money and regulatory
right.
free rides regulatorily.
So this article is from the NIH, National Library of Medicine,
which is an American organization. Dr. Fauci is in charge of it.
National Center for Biotechnology Information. It's a publication by PubMed.gov from March 19th of 2010.
This is not a new idea.
Here, yes, and that's where I said we're going back to, and this is where we're going to loop back into that Defense One article a little bit here too, even with some of this information. Just the abstract here. There's a patent for the flying vaccinator is a concept of using genetically engineered hematophagous insects to deliver vaccines. Here we show the generation of transgenic anopheline mosquito that expresses the Leishmania vaccine candidate SP15.
So that means an experimental vaccine, right? A vaccine candidate?
Yes.
Like the 3 vaccines that are on the leash in the United States right now, vaccine candidates.
Well,
because they're experimental.
They are, but yeah, thanks to Operation Warp Speed, they've been able to cut through the red tape that all of the other vaccines in the past have had to go through.
Okay.
SP15 fused the monomeric red fluorescent protein, MDS red, in its salivary glands. Importantly, mice bitten repeatedly by the transgenic mosquitoes raised anti-SP15 antibodies, indicating delivery of SP15 via blood feeding with its immunogenicity intact. Thus, this technology makes possible the generation of transgenic mosquitoes that match the original concept of a flying vaccinator. However, medical safety issues and concerns about informed consent mitigate the use of flying vaccinator as a method to deliver vaccines. We propose that this expression system could be applied to elucidate saliva malaria sporozoite.
Sporozoite.
Yeah, thank you. Interactions.
So everyone, want to take a stab at summarizing this. This basically means that they have demonstrated clinically, anyway,
they have.
that you can deliver a experimental vaccine to mammals
Yes.
using mosquitoes.
Exactly.
That
Successfully.
and this is 11 years ago.
Successfully 11 years ago.
Okay,
Yeah.
So now there's a vaccine literally on the streets
And-
that's killing people.
And they were able to prove that with this red fluorescent protein, MDF, so they had this protein.
Well, they could prove that the mosquito was carrying the vaccination material by use of the fluorescent protein.
The fluorescent protein, because then they could see that protein expressed in the mice. Now, fast forward, these mosquitoes are carrying a red bioluminescent as well on the males that they're releasing.
So in the Oxitec mosquito
So they
project,
can, according to what we're being told by the study, is that they can track these male mosquitoes. That's what the study is saying.
So this is actually an implementation, at least partially, of a technique that's been around for 11 years and has been patented by scientists working with or on behalf of the National Institute of Health, which Fauci is in charge of now and was then also.
Well, that, and also Bill Gates, bat company releasing over 100,000 genetically modified mosquitoes. If we want to hop ahead here to our next article that was published on May 4th of 2021.
Sure. I'm trying to find that article.
Yeah.
Right,
The
why don't
British
you give it to
company Oxitec is deploying a total of 144,000 genetically modified mosquitoes to study how to control their reproduction.
So it's 144,000 in this report.
In this report.
In the other one, it was, quote, thousands.
Right.
And I've seen another report where it's 7 million.
Well, the one report that I saw initially is that they're releasing 12,000 and that by the time they reproduce, they will have populated then 20 million.
What if they turn into like man-sized mosquitoes? Like, what if they rapidly like evolve and mutate? And
Then we need to make a meme now so we can make some money.
what if they're like the unintended consequences? Every generation they say double in size. It would only take like 10 or 15 generations, which would be like 3 or 4 seasons maybe.
I know.
Before the mosquitoes are like big monsters.
Right. And then then there's a real gas shortage.
Freaking Godzilla's running around all over the place trying to vaccinate people. Not okay. Not okay.
So yeah, 144 genetically modified mosquitoes to study how to control their reproduction and thus stop the spread of dengue, Zika, and other types of ailments in humans and animals. As reported by Axios, the company, which is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, released the mosquitoes a week ago from the Florida Keys. In a statement, Oxitec explained that this experiment seeks to study ways to stop the reproduction of that species of mosquito, the main transmitters of potentially fatal diseases. Why are Oxitec mosquitoes different? According to the company, the males in their insect cloud have a modified gene called OX5034 that restricts the survival of the females they mate with. Thus, mosquitoes will not grow large enough to bite humans. Only females consume blood. Males feed on nectar.
Nectar.
Oxitec notes that this species only represents 4% of the mosquito population in Florida, but it's the most disease-transmitting species. They have already released millions of modified mosquitoes around the world, including in Brazil and the Cayman Islands.
Okay, so they're just doing this all over the place.
So some of them, when I looked at it, they were controlled where they were doing like these releases in like boxes, like to see how they, there were controlled releases like in, with the mice and stuff like that. Okay. I can say that when they did this in Brazil, they had a spike in Zika virus because we were having to do special screening on anybody who was Zika positive. And monitoring newborn babies or babies in utero, and measuring their head circumferences because it can cause microcephaly.
Which means a head that's too small?
Yes.
So, but in the overall scheme of things, Zika is still, even though it's common, it's nowhere anywhere close to being as common as an everyday virus, right? Like the flu, or
like influenza, or like COVID.
Well, yeah, even then, it's so.
The vid.
How do you know? How do you trust the numbers if they say the vid? There's some people that are saying that the error rate on these PCR tests may be effectively as much as 90% or more in false positives and false negatives. How in the hell do you trust that any of the numbers that they come out with when they give you a case count? So either the Rona is way more common than anybody realizes, or it's almost completely uncommon. And
we were never testing for it before.
Well, even when we were testing for it, the tests were picking up other shit, and they were saying it was corona.
Right.
It was saying it was the COVID.
Because they weren't running the complete assay.
And even when they were, if there were 2 positives, they were coding it as corona. So if flu was present and COVID was present, it was being coded as a COVID case.
Right.
No matter what.
Right. And if somebody passed away of a
heart attack, but they were COVID positive.
Right.
COVID. Boom.
Right.
Got shot to death, COVID.
Right.
Got run over by a car, COVID. And so all of that has been documented for like a year now.
Right.
So the point
and
is,
you have a lot of families that are still fighting for those death certificates to even be changed.
To have them reflect the actual truth.
Right, exactly.
So so I think what that all boils down to is that COVID, although real, is very, very rare and somewhat conflated with the flu in terms of detection and testing. And to the degree of that conflation, nobody really probably knows.
Right.
So
I can't say that it's
compared to like Zika. Still pretty rare, or is Zika more prevalent?
I think COVID's more prevalent. I have to say, just because my own family has been affected by it, but.
They've been affected by something that may have been influenza, though, which is also a terrible experience to go through for 3, 4, 5, 6 days. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, with all these problems with the testing, how in the hell can anybody trust the diagnosis now? In 2020, the flu disappeared.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
In the United States. Except it didn't.
No.
They're just saying that it did.
No.
Now, how in the hell are you going to go treat corona and have all these lockdowns and then the flu disappears? Well, it disappeared because of the lockdown. I don't think so. I'm from the north. I know what it's like to be locked down for 3 months and people still get the flu.
Yeah.
In fact, that's when it's the most common, is when everybody's locked up in their house.
Exactly. Well, I mean...
So I guess what I'm asking is Zika a real serious crisis? Is dengue fever a real serious crisis?
Is it a crisis? No. is it a living, breathing virus that exists and is has more of a prevalence here than in some other areas? Yes, because we're in a subtropical area.
Okay.
But that being said,
Is it treatable when people get it?
absolutely.
Okay. And so dengue, Zika, West Nile, all these SARS.
You know what? A
COVID,
lot of them we
they're
treat
all
them with
treatable,
anti-malarial.
which would be like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine.
Meh.
No. I don't think we're allowed to talk about that.
Exactly.
Oh boy, somebody needs to write a book on all the bullshit, because there's just so many freaking layers of it.
I agree with you.
So many layers. So the mosquitoes will soon be, they already have been released.
They've been released, and that's one thing though that bothers me too.
Especially with the freaking sea breeze. What if they just all get blown out to sea instantly and then die? And nothing goes down. I mean,
I would be, you know what? Like,
can I end up with some freaking weird fish?
I honestly, after what I went through, okay, so for anyone who, I know we talked about it on a previous podcast before, but the reason, or part of the reason we were on a hiatus is because I had encephalitis in October. And I know we mentioned that whenever we first came back on the air.
Yeah,
and
encephalitis causes brain damage.
Yes. So I've been doing quite a bit of rehab. And so if I stumble across some stuff, that's why. That being said, though, you know, I fought something that had a freaking 20 to 30% mortality rate with treatment. What I had a 0.006, like it only affects 0.006% of the population.
Which is like 1 in 10 million or something.
I mean,
like that.
the fact, like the rarity of it and the severity of it. Mm-hmm. And having gone through that and be sitting here right now and talking,
and it can come from things like those viruses that we were talking about.
I am extremely blessed. Mm-hmm. And I hear some of this other stuff and all the fear tactics and everything. And I just want to say, like, it drives me nuts because
There's
you're
real
talking about
real stuff out
you're
there.
talking about something that has a high chance of survival.
When you say
Children,
you're talking about COVID. Now.
Yes.
Yeah.
That children are rarely,
Children
if
do not,
at all,
do not
affected by it.
They don't get sick from COVID. Period.
You know, we're doing them a huge injustice by having them wear masks.
It's abuse. It's
we're making
abuse of children.
We're making them sick. And
just think about it. Those masks are dirty. They're snotting all over the inside of them. It's disgusting.
I mean, it's just in so many ways. In so many ways.
So we've got this giant media-driven fake fucking frenzy about this thing that's pretty controllable, kills almost nobody, even among the people that it causes illness. It still kills almost nobody. And
meanwhile,
there's real people struggling with real shit like what you went through.
And continue to fight every freaking day.
And yet the world is obsessed with COVID, which basically kills no one.
Yeah.
All right. And okay, your grandfather died from it. I'm sorry. You better dig deeper, because I'm pretty sure your grandfather didn't die from it. He died from his diabetes and his 300-pound body weight. He died from his heart attack and his stroke. He died from his kidney failure. Blah blah blah. Okay.
He died from being treated inappropriately.
Yeah, he was. In other words, death by doctor. He was put on a ventilator. The ventilator did the same thing that the masks do to kids. It makes them sick. It compounds the problem. It recycles. If you really truly infected with that virus, it makes a better ecosystem for the virus to survive. So, yeah, but you've done remarkably well with your struggle, getting back to what you were saying about encephalitis. And
Thank you.
you know, Jazmine and I have these conversations where she gets frustrated about her progress. And I have to say, well, remember where you were. And because it's very, very frustrating for her. And it's tough for her to hear, remember where you were in October. Because in your mind as a survivor, you're thinking about where you were 2 years ago, before any of this shit happened.
Or remember where you were in October when before I got sick.
That's what I'm saying.
You know, it takes me back to my normal life pre that, because I had 10 days of darkness and that I don't remember much of, and some very dark times, and I've grieved a lot of loss since then. And no doubt, if you continue to follow us, you'll see some brain mishaps and some dyslexic moments as we continue doing this. But you know, I was super excited to get back and get back and doing this with you guys.
Well, this is, believe it or not, the 50th episode of Trouble in Paradise. We've done some side episodes and some extra little projects here and there. But this is, you know, the official episode 50, episode L, as we Romans like to say. But Jazmine, how would you recommend that people who have survived this long into our podcast and are still listening, how would they get a hold of us?
To get a hold of us, you can watch us right here. Subscribe and follow Trouble in Paradise on YouTube. Trouble at trouble239.com to email us. Trouble in Paradise on all major catchers. Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, and find us on Patreon at patreon.com/trouble239.
Awesome. And then where can we find you on Twitter?
I am Jazmine Star, I think. Am I Jazmine? Is it J-Star? Jazmine Star.
It's Jazmine Star with a Z and 2 R's. Jazmine Star.
See, there you go, people. I don't know who I am.
Jazmine Star 239. And I'm at Nigel Kent 239. And from Nigel, Jazmine, Hash Brown, Shiloh, and the rest of the crew here at Trouble in Paradise, broadcasting from beautiful South Naples. What's our sign off? I can't even. It's been so long. I can't remember what to say.
How do we turn this thing off?
You gotta say "stay out of trouble" first. You say "stay out of trouble." Okay, stay out of trouble. How do you?